Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180, for the very best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock, and again on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock Saturday, and for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI, Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and now in New Mexico on 1000 KKIM. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and behind the big board is our producer, Greg Held. Hey, Clay, that was a great show last week with Margaret Hoover, author of American Individualism.
Margaret's an interesting lady, and the fact that she moved to CNN was sort of depressing to me.
Well, considering the fact that the chances of you and I listening to CNN are slim and none.
That's why I said CNN.
Yes, this is true. Well, we've got a great show today for the Easter weekend. In the second half, we have Lily Marsh talking about Honor Flight, which is a great, great program getting our World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. But I'm excited about our guest that's on right now with us. He is a pastor of Shadow Mountain Church, and he's on, I think, 6,000 radio stations is what I heard. Pastor David Jeremiah. Pastor Jeremiah, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thank you for having me.
6,000 stations, that's incredible.
That sounds a little large to me. I don't think we're on quite that many, but we're on, I think what that should say is we're on the air 6,000 times a day in America.
Wow.
That means we're on about 2,000 or 3,000 stations. Some of them we're on 2 or 3 times a day.
Wow.
Well, now you can do it N1.
N1, yeah, right.
You know, I was blessed to be able to sit with you and listen to the guys from your church down at the Naval Base or the Marine Base in Miramar, I think it was, a month or so ago, and listen to your testimony. And I found that really interesting. And you had shared that you really hadn't done that testimony very often, so it was a unique experience not only for me, but also for the guys from your church. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's true, yeah. Yeah, I don't ever do that. Nobody ever asked me to do it, and they did there, and it was kind of fun to do it.
Well, I think it'd be good for us to just go back a little bit based on that testimony and let some of our listeners hear about David Jeremiah, who's been a pastor now for 30 years, married to Donna, and how you got started into the radio ministry and your other ministries.
Well, you ask me what you want me to tell you, and I'll try to do it.
Well, let's start. I took some copious notes when I was there. I couldn't stop. How about the New York elevator story? I thought that was really interesting.
Well, one of the things that happens when you get involved in media, especially television, is that you end up being recognized by people. And the story I told that day was about taking my family to New York. Actually, it was a gift from our congregation to celebrate, I think it was 25 years after we'd been here. And one of the things they did for us was they wanted us to travel in style, and so they rented 2 limousines. We had 14 people with us, and so we had a stretch white limousine and a stretch black limousine, and we tooled all over New York for about a week in those limousines, and it was a lot of fun, and we'd never done anything like that before. But my greatest fear was that someone would see us, and then they would think I was one of these quote-unquote televangelists, that was riding around in luxury. And up until about the last day we were there, nobody recognized us, and we felt like we were home free. We went to a Broadway play one night. We were coming back to our hotel, and we got on the elevator to go up to our room, and the guy got on the elevator with us, and he kept looking at me, and as the elevator kind of got closer to his floor, he said, "You know what?" He said, "You look a lot like David Jeremiah." And I said, "Well, that's probably because that's who I am." And we got to his floor, and the door opened, and he walked out, and as he was leaving, he turned around, and he said, "No, you're not." And then he got on the floor and left. So we don't know if he thought I was who I was or if he thought I was somebody that looked like who I was, but he left us all in stitches because it was really a funny moment.
That would be very exciting, to be recognized and then to have someone say you're not who you are.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially since you knew who you were all the time.
I knew. I never had lost my identity.
And then there was another story you talked about, a book signing that you were having. I think it was I'm not sure where it was, but Josh McDonald's name come up.
Yeah, well, I love, when I travel, I love to go into Christian bookstores. First of all, they all need to be encouraged. Christian bookstores are kind of on tough times these days, as many bookstores are, but especially the smaller Christian mom-and-pop bookstores. Many of them are struggling. And when I'm near one and I know that it's there, sometimes they're in a mall, I can just pop in and say hello to them. And I went into this little Christian bookstore, and the gal who saw me kind of looked startled, and she goes, "Oh, I can't believe you're in our store." She says, can you stay here for just a minute? Let me go back and get the other girls. Well, she had some girls working in the back. So she went and got a couple of girls, and they came out, and they were all giggly, like I was some kind of rock star or something. And then she said, by the way, she says, would you be willing to sign some of your books? And I said, sure, I'll be glad to do that. She says, I'll be right back. So she comes back. And when she comes back, she has 6 books written by Josh McDowell. And I didn't know what to do, so I signed his name in the books and gave them back to her, and I left. And to this day, she probably thinks Josh McDowell visited her bookstore.
Oh, my.
So that's it. Those are some of the funny things that happen when you do what I do.
Pastor Jeremiah, I have to share a funny story. I used to have a beard, and I looked a lot like Kenny Rogers. So I walked into a restaurant, and somebody just insisted I was Kenny Rogers, and they handed me a napkin, and I signed Kenny Rogers' name to it and wished him a good day, and off they went. So
yeah, well, they didn't know any different, and as long as Kenny Rogers doesn't find out, you're in good shape.
That's right. Our guest by phone this Easter weekend is Pastor David Jeremiah from Shadow Mountain Church, who is on 6,000 times a day.
6,001.
Well, 6,001, and actually he's on 2 of our 4 stations. He's on 1410 KERI and 1,000 KKIM in New Mexico.
That's great. I think there was one more story that I remember you talking about. You were giving a talk somewhere, and Dr. Stanley's name was involved in it.
Oh yeah, I was at the National Religious Broadcasters Convention, and I was walking through the expo, which is where they have all the booths and everything. It's kind of off in one of the expo halls, and I was talking to my friends, and one of my buddies said, hey, there's a lady following you. And I said, is that right? She said, yeah, she's trying to get speed. She's not real young, and so she's having a hard time catching up. And so I turned around, and sure enough, there was this lady. She was shuffling along trying to catch up with me, so I stopped and greeted her, and she goes, oh, I can't believe this is happening. She said, I've waited my whole life to meet Dr. Stanley, and here I get the chance to do it. So she stood there and talked with me like I was Charles Stanley, and I didn't tell her any different. She went on her way, and I went on my way. And and my buddies called me Dr. Stanley for the rest of the week. I couldn't get over that, but just one of those things.
Sure. How did you become a pastor?
Well, I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was a pastor for many, many years, and then he became the president of Cedarville College in Ohio. And he was there for many years as the president and chancellor. But I grew up in a pastor's home. I kind of always thought that wasn't something I would ever do. But when I was a senior in college, there was a moment when my father came to me as the president of college that I was going to, and he said, hey, we have all of our professor out speaking in places this weekend, and we have a little church up near Columbus, and they just really need somebody to come and speak to them on Sunday. And I said, and you want me to do that? And he says, well, yeah. He says, just go up there and give your testimony. You don't have to give any kind of major message. I said, well, it's a good thing because I don't know how to do that, and I wouldn't know what to do. So I went up there. At the time, I was dating the girl that I ultimately married, Donna, and we went up there together. And this was really, you talk about a country church. This church had a cemetery right beside it. It was, it was like, you see those pictures in some of the calendars that are produced. Anyway, we go in there, there's about 30 people there, and they're farmers, and they had a little music, and then I got up and gave my testimony. We went to dinner with one of the families, thinking we were going to drive back to the school, and at dinner time, he told me how excited they were that I was going to stay over for the evening, and I had no idea that I was supposed to do that, and I didn't have anything else to say. So I repackaged what I said in the morning, gave it back to him again that night, and long story short, I started going back there every week to help this church. And during that process, God was working in my heart, and that's when I realized this is what he wanted me to do. And so I was getting close to graduation. Don and I got married after we graduated, and then I went to Dallas Seminary for 4 years to get ready to do what I'm doing today.
But that was in your heart, and it was in God's heart, but it wasn't necessarily in the hearts of some of the people that were producing the shows. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, there were people that didn't think I was doing the right thing, and among them at first was my wife. We weren't married yet, and she wasn't sure she wanted to be a pastor's wife, and we got that resolved, and obviously it's been pretty successful because she and I have been married 50 years in June.
Wow.
And she's a great pastor's wife.
Congratulations, 50
Thank
years.
you.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Let's go back. Well, what I want to get into, we're going to come back in a couple of minutes, what I want to get into is how you actually got into the radio, and you started out in San Diego, and you talked about, and when I was at your testimony, you talked about a train ride you took from L.A. from L.A. or San Diego to L.A. to meet with some producers and some of the situations on what took place with those producers,
Sure.
and then what you did after that.
All right.
And also when we get back, I'd like to talk a little bit about your opinion on the state of the church here in America and what direction you think we're going in.
All right.
Okay, we'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.